Hey guys, what is going on? My Modern Leadership Book Club. What's going on, Julie? What's going on, Shelly? So pumped to be back here with you guys. We are diving into the second part of Extreme Ownership. I don't know why I'm going to show you the book because I took the cover off. We're going to dive into chapters number 2 and 3. Super pumped to not only be going through this book with you, but also be seeing it from a different set of eyes. It kind of feels like every single time I read this book, I think I read it 10 times, some other things really stand out to me. Good morning, Amber. Great to have you with us. So I'm sure that you guys feel the same way. I know a lot of you guys have read this before. Maybe this is your first time. It's such a great opportunity to not only come here and to brainstorm what we kind of heard, which I definitely am going to be asking you guys today what your biggest takeaways were from chapter number 2 and chapter number 3. But it's just the power of working together in a group like this. So that being said, Anthony, what's going on, brother? Good morning. That being said, welcome to Modern Leadership, where we see things differently. We help entrepreneurs become modern leaders so they can excel both personally and professionally without sacrificing family time or burning themselves out. How we do that? First part of it is this book club. If you're not a part of this book club, where are you? You may be seeing this video on YouTube, but we actually have a book club. It's inside of my program. Inside of my free app that I'm granting people access to for free by being a part of the book club. If you go to modernleadership.us/book club, I'll leave you the link also in the description. If you're not signed up, that's where you get the emails, know when our calls are, and all that kind of stuff, all right? But this is the first step of it. Second is we have shorter videos throughout the week that we kind of share some different topics and suggestions related to leadership, related to coaching, related to your business, and also related to family. I like to sprinkle that in. And then we have longer workshops on the weekends where we can take a deeper dive into that leadership stuff. But the reason why I put together this book club is because, number one, we see things differently. I want you to see things through the eyes of how leadership makes an impact, not only in your personal life, not only when it comes to leading yourself, but also leading in your business. So we take leadership books and we take a spin of business on them. Now, that being said, we have a lot of people like Julie in here who are first responders holding it down. And I appreciate you so much, Julie, because of course, that's what I did for 20 years. And so we do have a lot of leaders who are going through this, and they're going to be looking at it through the lens of not only a leader at work, but also a leader at home. So we're going to dive right in. This is the second part of this. If you missed the first one, definitely dive into that. And just a little caveat, right here next to the left side of me is my little puppy, Rocket. So we picked him up last Saturday. I'm like the head trainer that I've been designated in my house, which means that if he hears me, he needs to see me and he needs to be sitting right next to me, or he will yelp and cry for hours. And so, you know how I talk when I get excited? I get really loud. Well, yes, he starts to bark and scream and all this kind of stuff. He can hear me anywhere in the house, and he needs to be right next to me. So I got him right here. If you hear him, I promise you, he's not being held captive. He is in his kennel or in his crate, but he might make an appearance a little bit later, okay? All right, so let's dive into chapter number 2. Chapter number 2, it's called No Bad Teams, Only Bad Leaders. So question for you guys, while you were reading chapter 2, what part spoke loudest to you? When it comes to this chapter, was there some things that you really resonated with this chapter? Was there a takeaway where you're this is what I really need to lean into? Or was there a little bit of shame, guilt, humiliation, all those head voices that kind of came up when you heard and started to read this chapter? I think for me, and I have some highlights that I'm going to go through right here. I think for me, my head or my heart actually very easily went down that path of man, if Leif and Jocko struggle with this, of course I'm going to struggle with it. Of course other people are going to be able to struggle with it, because if they were struggling with it and they were going through all the different struggles and stuff that they have in this book, of course struggles is where success lies, right? Now in this chapter, it's called No Bad Team, No Bad Leaders. And basically there's a story in the beginning that talks about when they were going through Hell Week in the Navy SEALs. They're kind of talking about these two different, they call them boat crews, but they're crews of, I think, of 6 different people who are in the crew. And they do races and things like that. And they have multiple different boat crews. And what they notice is one group of boats or one crew was winning everything. They were in first place, they were leading, they were excelling, and this other team was always in last place. If you've ever been in any kind of boot camp kind of atmosphere, what that means is if you're in last place, they make you work out harder, and the first place person gets to rest. And what they noticed is that this group always finished first and this other group always finished last. And so what they decided to do was pretty genius. They said, you know what? Let's switch the leader of the number 1 team and the leader of the number 6 team, right? The last place team. And as I was going through here, I was kind of like amazed by what happened, but I can see how not only that belief drives behavior that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but how like a leader can totally transform the dynamics of a team. So he said that the leader who was with the winning team decided that he was going to go, or not decided, but was told that he's going to lead this other team who was in last place. And it kind of looked like he was a little irritated and upset, but it also kind of sounds like he took it as a challenge. The leader who was on the weak team kind of felt like, oh man, finally I made it. They finally saw that it was my team that was holding me back, not me. And he went to the other team who was in first place. This is what he said. He said, when this happened, when they changed boat crew leaders, he said a miraculous turnaround began to take place. The boat crew number 4 had gone from first or last place to first. The boat crew members had begun to work together as a team, and they actually started to win. He says that's why this was his first big aha, was there's no bad teams, there only is bad leaders. He said the answer is leadership. Leadership is the single greatest factor in any team's performance. Whether a team succeeds or fails is up to the leader. The leader's attitude sets the tone for the entire team. The leader drives performance or doesn't. And this compiles or applies not to just the most senior leader of an overall team, but to the junior leaders of teams within the team. He said he actually reflected back as well to his own boat crew situation. He says, my boat crew at times struggled to perform until I figured out that I had to put myself in the most difficult position at the front of the boat and lead. That required driving the boat crew members harder than I thought they could go. I discovered that it was far more effective to focus on their efforts, not on the days to come or to the far distance finish line they couldn't see yet, but instead on a physical goal immediately in front of them. He said the beach marker or a landmark or a road sign 100 yards ahead. If we could execute with monumental effort just to reach an immediate goal that everyone else could see, we could then continue to the next visually attainable goal and then next. So I kind of like remind myself of going even through the police academy in this situation too, because like there were people who decided to take the lead, and they basically allowed us all to kind of like elevate ourselves to their specific level because they were taking on that leadership role. It's so easy to not take on that leadership role. It's so easy to kind of just sit back there and wait for something to happen. But what he's saying here is it's just the power of leaders. So the what do they say? The speed of the leader is the speed of the pack. And it's so true. And there's a lot of caveats to like what makes up that type of leader. As a matter of fact, this is what this whole entire book is like written about. But of course, the extreme ownership is that part of it. He says, the principle is when leaders who epitomize extreme ownership drive their teams to achieve higher standard of performance, they must recognize that when it comes to standards as a leader, it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. So it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. He says teams need a forcing function to get the different members working together to accomplish the mission, and that is what leadership all about. He says, but life can throw any number of circumstances in the way from your business or your team, and every team must have junior leaders ready to step up and temporarily take on the roles and responsibilities of their immediate bosses to carry on the team's mission and get the job done if and when the need arises. So this is a powerful lesson as well. So what he's kind of saying here, how I'm taking it is, yes, you need to lead. You need to have that pure extreme ownership. Figure out what you can do to elevate, motivate, excite, keep them inspired. But also at the same time, you're modeling the behavior for them. You're developing them into a leader. So in a moment, like let's say he wasn't the boat crew, or he wasn't in lead of the boat, somebody else could step up and actually lead, right? So it's not just I'm the leader and these are the followers. It's I'm a leader and here's all the people that I'm developing into the future leaders. Because what we didn't say is that second, the boat crew that originally was first and then switched up their leader, they started to get into second place. So it was this vying between now both boats, who was once the end and once the beginning, or once the first place and once the sixth place. Now they were kind of like vying for that position, because when the leader was present in that boat crew, he was developing other leaders so that when he moved out, people were able to step up. And yes, they took on the other leader from the other team, but because they already had that great synergy and they had developed themselves into other leaders, they were able to still continue to excel. It wasn't that they dropped all the way to level 6, right? It's because when we think about leadership, and I think about this all the time when I think about coaching, when I think about like one-on-ones that I have with my people, or the people who, the clients that I have, is I don't want to just develop other people so that they need me to get one-on-ones. I actually want to develop them to the point where they don't need me. As a matter of fact, like I want to teach them everything I know and more so that they can blast past me. And it just so happens that when I do that, they do want to stick around. But in reality, I'm like, I want to develop other leaders. And what is a way that I can do that is to like share, like not only everything that I've learned, but to do whatever I can to help them continue to level up. And so that's why, like when you think about this, just the whole premise of this chapter is all about there's no bad teams, there's only bad leaders, is not meant to make you feel less than. As a matter of fact, like he didn't even need to be at the front of the boat. Let me just say that. Like what if you're somebody who's like, you know what, I have different strengths. Like I'm not good at being at the front of the boat, but I'm good at doing some job in the middle or doing some job in the back or doing this analytical piece or whatever. You can still lead and put somebody who has the strengths that you need to have in that position. That is called leadership. It is influencing the whole team, and you don't have to necessarily do it from one position. It could be anything. So when you do think about that, I really want you to think about that in terms of it doesn't have to be exactly the way, like I've got to play to my strengths, but also a leader is really good at developing and adjusting and putting people in their strength zone, which might be at the front, which might be on stage, which might be in front of everybody else, right? And you might be the person who's behind the stage. Maybe you're doing the Facebook ads. Maybe you're doing this stuff, but there's somebody who has that brand and is like the recognizable face, but in reality, there's somebody else that's behind the scenes, but everybody's just playing to their strength, all right? So I don't want you to also think that a leader has to be the person in the front of the boat, because it doesn't. A leader is just somebody who works and really grabs everybody and puts them into the really great synergy with one another. Now, there is in chapter number 2, there is a little bit of a breakdown of how this applies to business. He said that he was having a conversation with a group of people who, I guess the CEO had passed down like some restructuring around the commissions that people were going to get for the sales team. Yes, Ed, and identifying the strengths of everyone on the team, 100%, including you. Don't forget to identify your strengths, Ed. Got some powerful strengths, brother. Okay, so what they were talking about was that he went into this meeting because the CEO was like, I don't know what's going on, but there's a disconnect from this this restructuring of the commission for our salespeople. Like they're getting upset and frustrated, and I don't know what's going on. So Jocko went. Actually, I think this one was Leif. Leif went in, and they started to talk to everybody and say, hey, what's going on? Like, why don't you guys like this? And vice versa. And what they found out is that they really respected the CEO, but the CEO hadn't actually delivered like the why, the reasoning behind what it was that she was doing. And so what happened is they all started to make up the assumption for themselves. They said, this is going to hurt our business. This is going to hurt the people that we're going to talk to, right? Because these are the leaders, right? These are going to hurt the people on the front line. Like, why is she doing this? All this kind of stuff. But they were too nervous to actually ask her why she had decided to implement this new strategy, right? Because they're like, well, she's going to think I'm stupid, or, she might fire us or whatever. Anyway, so having this conversation, one of the things that Leif realized is, okay, like they don't understand the why. They don't understand why she's doing this and the impact that it's going to make and all of that information. So here's the thing. This is something that I remember a lot because it would typically get in my way. And that is like, if you want somebody to do something or you want to change something up, you have to lead with the why you're doing it, and really why it's going to help them and why it's going to make a really good impact. Because here's the thing, if you don't lead with why, people make it up. Like literally we in our brains, I mean, this is the reason why like those soap operas are so good. It's like so exciting. And then they like leave you like trying to like think about what's going to happen next. And it gets you to go, I've got to watch the rest of the show, because your brain doesn't want to have an open loop. Some people who write great emails to do this too, where they end the email and they're like, oh, and tomorrow I'll talk about that, okay? And it's because when you have like that open loop, your brain wants to fill it up. Well, if you don't understand, or if you haven't communicated the why, somebody will go into their brain and go, well, let me figure out the why. Oh, they must be doing this because they want to make more money as a leader. They must be doing this because of X, Y, and Z. They must be doing this because they want to get rid of me. They must be, and we come up to conclusions. Would you guys agree? Sorry. Our brain comes up to all of these conclusions. We call them head voices as to what that thing means. And usually it doesn't mean any of that thing at all, right? And this is what we can do if we don't realize that communicating this why. Anyway, so he had that conversation. He went to go talk to the CEO and he's like, hey, like, why is it you're doing this? And she like really explained why and how it's going to help the company, how it's going to help them make more money, how it's going to weed out like the people on the bottom so that the people at the top have more people to like sell to. And he's like, that's all great, but your people have no idea about any of that stuff because you explain it to them. So I'd highly suggest that you go explain it to them so that they have that buy-in and they understand why they're actually doing this, why we're making this adjustment. And so she went back and she explained that to them and they're like, that makes total sense. Now we can communicate that to our chain of command, to the people that are on the front line. So they have an idea of like what's going to happen. They maybe like all of them aren't going to love it, but now we have a way of communicating it so that it really hits home with them. Now, one of the things that I do that I like that he brought up is he talked to the CEO and the CEO took ownership and said, okay, I didn't do a good job of explaining this. I'm going to go back and explain it. But afterwards, he talked to the group again. He's like, what do you think, guys? And they were like, we're glad that like she came and she told us about this. And he said, okay, question for you. Whose fault is it that she didn't tell you? And he said the room was kind of silent. But basically he said, it's your fault because you didn't ask the why. See, here's the thing, and I love the approach that he takes, is like you have to have extreme ownership on every level, right? Because some people could just be like, well, they didn't tell me, so it's their fault. Remember, though, that we can only control the things we can control, which is, how about us asking? Everybody in the room was like nervous about asking her, but if they had asked her, they wouldn't have had this problem at all, right? Like, hey, can you tell us a little bit about your why? What's your vision for this, right? You don't have to be like negative or get aggressive with it. It's just like, hey, I would love to be behind you 100%, but I want to like find the why behind it, the meaning behind it, why we're going this direction, how it's really going to help us so I can help communicate this to other people, because that's what great leaders do, right? And so not only did he help solve this problem, but he also made them realize that they both have to take ownership. The CEO, when she found out that she had missed this mark, she's going to continue to now lead with why. But also, like when it comes to the people in the room, they're like, we're going to make sure we have extreme ownership and we ask questions when we don't know what that why is, right? And so it's this really great synergy of not only is it the part about like actually having great leaders, right? And being able to communicate, but also developing other leaders in the process by making sure that the people in there were comfortable with asking her those deeper questions, even though it might feel like a little bit like you might be a little nervous. In reality, you're not going to lose your job from asking a question like that, especially if you lead with that. So that was probably my biggest takeaway, is the application to business and how we have to not only take ownership ourselves, but instill an environment of taking ownership so that other people can step up and lead, because obviously she's not going to be there forever and somebody else is going to have to take on her role. So that is what spoke to me loudest in chapter number 2. That being said, before we move on, I want to hear from you guys. What spoke loudest to you? Maybe it's something I just talked about right now. Maybe it's something else entirely different. So chapter number 2, what spoke loudest to you? And I'm going to come down here. I'm going to read some of this. Shelley says, leaders have no excuses. They figure it out. 100%. 100%. Remember, and by the way, excuses come up for me all the time still, even in my own life. I just remind myself that when I have excuses come up, that's usually that my mind is like, it's closed off. It's like I've already put the blame on something else, and it's never helpful. Even if it's like, let's say Crohn's disease related, even if I shift the blame to Crohn's disease, it means that I, Mark, cannot do anything about it. I can do stuff about it. I could sleep more. I could take more naps. I can do whatever I need to do, but I can't do it if I blame Crohn's disease, if I blame the excuse, if I blame the time, if I blame my puppy over here who's like starting to wake up. If I blame him, I cannot do anything different. And so I've shifted the blame, but I've also shifted the responsibility. And so I can't do anything different, right? You'll still have excuses come up, things pop up, but it's that awareness piece, right? Where you can make that change. Let's see. Amber says, I've never felt more supported and guided. I appreciate that. I want to stick around because I know you're one of the persons to help push me. I appreciate that, Amber. I appreciate that. Let's see. The ripple effect is huge. Yes, Joe, it is. In I know that John Maxwell talks about that, like your life won't change until you change something you do every single day. But it's these little micro moments, right? It's like the feeling of leaning into your heart versus your head. It doesn't really seem like it would be that much of a significance. But if you do that this morning, and then it leads you to have a better relationship and conversation later, and it leads you to have a better workout, it leads you to eat better, it leads you, like that one thing, literally, you can actually trace it back to everything else that happened that day. It's the same thing like when you think about like our stories, like if you're a push coach, you know that we have the push method, right? Everything traces back to the story, right? So why pay attention to all the other things? We need to pay more attention to the thing that created this like positive snowball, right? So it definitely is leaning into that. Ask the why, every level. Mission, same goals. Yes, comfort in asking why. Some same biggest takeaway. Yeah, Julie, I feel the same way, and I think it probably has to do just because of the careers that we have. Is to make sure that we explain the why. I mean, I can tell you guys a story about when we had a pursuit policy that came down from LAPD. It came down from my chain of command. So it went from the captain to the lieutenant. The lieutenant told me, and let me tell you, like everybody, like the captain was okay with it. The lieutenant was kind of upset about it. And then all the other sergeants were like grumbling about it. And then everybody in the field was grumbling about it. And I had an opportunity then, because I knew coaching, that I was like, okay, I have to sell this in a way of what it's going to do to benefit us, what it's going to do to benefit the citizens, and what it's going to do to benefit the officers. And so I literally had to go in a roll call and I had to sell that. Now, the way that everybody was thinking is that everybody's taking our ability of like going into pursuit of somebody. It has to be like a misdemeanor above crime, which means if somebody's driving down the street, they don't stop at a stop sign, and you go to light them up, you go to put your lights on, and they keep going. We can't chase them unless we have something else. We have to just say okay, and then we have to get their license plate and try to do a workup and find them later. But we weren't allowed to pursue them anymore. And we were getting a lot of gang members and guns and stolen cars from those kind of things, right? Because generally those are the people who don't stop. And so they hadn't necessarily sold it. They said like, oh, guys, this is just from the commission. You're not allowed to do this anymore. And like, that was it. And I'm like, can we like explain like why? Like, why are they doing this? And nobody even stopped to slow down to identify it. And when I went back and I started to do the research, because I didn't like just give this presentation the first day that I heard this, right? I was like, okay, there has to be a reason why. And the reason why is because we found that a large number of citizens who were getting hurt were for that very reason. When the police were like, trying to pull somebody over for an infraction, for like a traffic violation, that person was like running people over, like changing people's like families for like life. And we come to find out like some of them just didn't have a driver's license, or some of them were like, drunk. And we actually saw that we were doing more damage than we were doing positive things. And so it wasn't that they were trying to take it away from us. They were trying to keep the citizens and us, because remember, we're in a pursuit. It's unsafe for us, safe until we get to the point where we know what we have. We have somebody who, is fleeing from us with a man with a gun. We know what we have. We're going to pursue. We're going to do whatever it takes to kind of like get them into custody, right? But if we don't know, like 90% of the time, it was people who just didn't have a driver's license or just whatever, right? Or had like a really like minor warrant, and we were putting people's lives into jeopardy. And by me sharing this with people, did everybody in the roll call go, okay, that makes sense? No, but about 80% of them did. And they were like, well, that makes sense. I still don't like it. And I still am going to have to think about like figuring out like some probable cause to actually stop a car before I even put the lights on. But I do understand why that's the case, right? There also was somebody else who had been involved in a car accident during a traffic collision, and he had broken his femur, and he was in that division. So they were talking about him like, yeah, he had this happen to him too. And so I had to find a way to sell the why behind it, to get them to lean into it and to not be disgruntled. I don't know why, and Julie, maybe like your department's better. I don't know why, like they don't explain that. Like at some point during the chain of command, it stopped. That communication stopped. And it is one of these, do it because I said so. Let me tell you, I try to use that with my kids every once in a while when they make me come to my wit's end. Do you know how many times it works? This many times, 0 times. I don't know why I still continue to do it, but it's not the process that works, right? It's not do it because I said so. It's explaining the why. Even honestly, for my kids, even explaining the why behind why I'm asking them to do something, especially for my son, because he's an analyzer. actually gets him more likely to do it. Not that everybody's going to do it, but it's just you have to explain the why, or they're going to explain it, and usually it's not an explanation that you want to hear. Does that make sense? So thanks for bringing that up. I think it was Julie who brought it up. You must weigh the risk versus reward. 100%, Ed. Being a police officer too, you are in the same frame of work as, or frame mindset as me. All right. Chapter number 3. You guys ready for chapter number 3? This is going to be a little bit faster because he is trying to escape right now. Chapter number 3 is believe. All right. And it's actually a perfect, timing because it's kind of like leads from what we talked about before. All right. This is, let me see. This was a situation. This one was Jocko. And what he talked about is like having belief in the mission. All right. This is kind of like the why, right? But while he was in Ramadi, there was this notification that was passed down. And it was like, okay, they're Navy SEALs. They're going to like really crazy situations, right? Where people could get injured and killed. They have a lot of training. And then there was the Iraqi army that was there. They didn't have a lot of training. A lot of them would desert, if they were put into a gunfight. They would just do things that were not in congruence with what the Navy SEALs wanted. What they told them is that they now, at every mission, had to take Iraqis with them to perform their dangerous missions. And he said, as the person who's in charge of that command, he was thinking to himself, what in the world? Why would we want to take people who put our lives in jeopardy, who, like he said in one time, was like shooting over their head, not even looking at their target, and there was people who were like Navy SEALs down range. He's like, why would we now want to take them on and put our lives in jeopardy just so that we can work with them? So one of the things that he talked about, and I'm going to read some of this, he says, as Task Unit Bruiser's commander, which is the unit that he called himself, he said, I knew my actions and mindset carried great weight among my troops, but these were my orders. And for me to lead, I first had to believe. So he said, so I kept my doubts to myself and I asked the simple question is why? Why would they do that? He said that led to another question, which was, what was winning? Like, what does winning actually look like? And when he thought about this, meaning like, and by the way, like freaking awesome leader, right? He's not even getting this from his chain of command. He's just thinking it through in his own brain. How can I sell this to my people? When he realized what leading looked like is him and all of the troops getting out of Iraq and allowing the Iraqi army to be there and to actually be able to hold it down without having the help from the United States. And he said, how are they going to do that if we're the ones who are constantly doing all of the training and all of the missions and making this place safe? Like, once it gets safe and we leave, what's going to happen? And he said he started to think about, like, it would be his kids who would have to still be there and still have to like take control of the situation, when in reality, what would happen if they actually helped the Iraqi army become the type of people who could like actually hold it down, who could like make the streets stay safe? Yes, the Navy SEALs would be there in the beginning to really like combat like the biggest issues that they had. But once things got smaller and they were able to actually be a part of the missions, the Iraqi army would be basically like being taught like Navy SEAL type tactics that they would be able to hold it down. And then they could all come back home, because that is what winning looked like. So what he did is he called a meeting. He called a meeting with everybody because he knew that everybody was grumbling. And he said, all right, fellas. He said, I understand he started off by saying, you've heard the rumors. Everybody has to, who is going to go out, has to have an Iraqi soldier with them. And so everybody started getting upset and frustrated and whatnot. And he said he cut the not so subtle protest short. He said, I understand. The battlefield here is dangerous. It's difficult. And why make it even harder by forcing us to fight alongside Iraqi armies? And he said, when he said that, everybody was like, yeah. So here's also that play. It's a play of empathy in the beginning, right? He said, well, let me ask you something. If the Iraqi military can't get to a point where they can handle security in their own country, who is going to do that? And he said that everybody just started looking around and they were thinking, well, I guess we would never be able to leave, or we'd have to have our family or other people come over here and take over. And he said, but to ensure everyone clearly understood the strategic importance of why we were being directed to do this, he said he made it perfectly clear. He says, if Iraqi soldiers can't do it, there's only one that will, and that's us. If we don't get these guys up to speed, we will have this same mission next year and the year after that and the year after that and the year after that. The U.S. military will be stuck here for generations. It will be up to our sons and our sons' sons to secure Iraq. Now, he said just having that conversation, it wasn't like everybody totally agreed with him, but they now understood the mission. And now when you understand the mission, you believe the why behind it of like, we have to do this if we truly want to win our version of win, right? Beginning with the end in mind. And when you can begin with the end in mind and see what winning looks like, then you can see, is this a step towards that? And the answer would be yes, if you're thinking about this logically, right? Because if they had just not included them, they would have never been able to do it on their own, right? Once the U.S. soldiers left. So he said, once I analyzed the mission and understood for myself that critical piece of information, then I could believe in the mission. But if I didn't believe in it, if I had just talked to the SEALs, there would have been no way possible that I could have convinced them to believe in it. And if they didn't believe in it, they would not have been behind it, and it would not have seen the success that it did. He said the principle is in order to convince, inspire others to follow and accomplish a mission, a leader must be a true believer in the mission first. Now, there's this great little breakdown, a little bit about how. This is the one that I was kind of talking about, where she was explaining it in more detail, and then asked them why is it that they didn't ask that question of the structure, the breakdown of the new commission structure. Let me see what the last one was, because I think I got the stories a little bit confused. Chapter 2. Let me see what this one was. Let's see. Oh, yeah, this is the one where they had the VIP or the VP, and the VP was just pointing directions to everyone else, saying, it's their fault, this isn't working, these people aren't following the orders, these people. And basically, because he wasn't willing to take that level of extreme ownership, he ended up getting to the point where his CEO had to fire him because he was not, the CTO was not performing, because he wasn't taking ownership for himself. He was pointing fingers towards everyone else. So that one was that previous chapter's one. But this one related to the why has to do with the whole explaining the compensation plan to people. And by explaining the compensation plan to people and getting to their why, they were able to like really connect to the mission and the reason why they're doing this. And that way they can explain it to other people, which kind of like brings me to the end of today. By the way, I want to hear your guys' takeaway from that chapter, from chapter number 3 as well. But we're going to jump into chapter 4 next week. But it's so easy to point to the outside facts when things start to happen, right? It's the lowest hanging fruit, like they say. But you have to just remind yourself, like when you are pointing to those things, to the facts, to the things that happen outside, to the things you can't necessarily control, you're giving your power away. And the way that you can have your power back is by taking extreme ownership. But the second caveat to that is when you take extreme ownership, especially for the things that you don't necessarily, like that other people don't necessarily believe that you control, it actually implants the belief of extreme ownership in someone else. So if I take extreme ownership for something my daughter did or said, or my son said, or son did, or ownership for like, nope, it's my fault, the dog pooped on the floor. And they're like, well, Dad, it's really not your fault. It's my fault because I wasn't watching. It's because of this. And then I go back and I say, well, in reality, it was my fault because I didn't teach you what to look for. I didn't tell you where to keep the dog off of. I didn't tell you like all of this, I didn't train you properly before you were able to do that. And when you can take that level of extreme ownership, not only does it give you the power back, and believe it or not, you feel good afterwards because you can control the pieces that you can control, but it also implants the belief in somebody else. It's like, you know what? Like, that's what I need to do. Like, that's what, my dad or my mom or whoever did, because when they take extreme ownership, it's like modeling the behavior, you're able to model it for someone else. So, and like Ed says, the war is bigger than the battle. 100%, Ed, 100%. Okay, so I want to hear biggest takeaways from chapter number 3, and then we're going to get Rocket up because he's like literally staring at me, and if I look down at him one more time, he's going to start crying. Let's see. Ed says, and we think we already went over this, you must weigh risk versus reward. That is a very important piece, Because if you weigh those two, it's like the pros and cons of everything. You can definitely see which one is more head voice and which one is more heart voice. But being able to see them is such an important part of that. I mean, that's something that we talk about as a life coach too. We don't want to just pretend like they don't exist. They do exist. There's positives and negatives for everything. But we can't pretend that they don't exist. Let's see. Amber says, if it directly affects them, they should have the opportunity to know why. I agree. I totally agree with you, Amber. That's a good story. Julie says, agencies need the modern leadership blueprint. I'm trying, Julie. I'm trying. But you know what? I start with the most powerful leaders first, which is you. Let's see. If the leader does not believe, the team will not believe. Shelly, so important, right? I mean, this is also related to like putting together your program, putting together your products. If you don't believe in your program, if you don't believe in your products, like you can't expect other people to believe in it too. Does that make sense? So when you think about like all the things that you've been through, all the transformation you've been, what you've learned through getting coached and being coached and through your business and products and programs, like they say, being proof that your actual product works, that's where that belief comes into play. And that's how it like will shift into your, not only your mannerisms, but how you communicate. Because when you communicate with that level of confidence, people want to get behind leaders who have that level of confidence. It says, without taking ownership and pointing fingers to the outside influence, always makes me, lessons learned I learned a long time ago. When you point a finger, there are 3 pointing back at you, 100%. It's one of those things, right? When you start taking ownership, it shows your people that you are taking ownership. And a lot of times they go, well, no, it's kind of my fault. But if you had blamed them first, I guarantee you would have that finger pointed back at you. That's a good story. It was just an aha moment for me. Amber, these are all stories. These are all stories, my friend. Okay. You guys want to see Rocket? Come here, buddy. You're going to be live on YouTube. You want to come out? Come here. Come here. Oh, let's not eat that. Let's not eat that. Come here. You want to see? You want to see you? Do you want to see? You're a little nervous? It's okay. So this is Rocket. He is controlling my life. He is the leader in charge of this household right now. And he smells some of the dog food on me. And here he is. Here he is. He's going to be our guard dog, okay? He really likes to bite Teresa's feet. All right, guys. Appreciate you so much for being a part of the book club. And so does Rocket. Rocket appreciates you too. Look forward to seeing you guys inside the app and seeing you guys next week. You guys keep crushing it. Keep leading from the front. How about you? You going to lead from the front? All right. And I'll knock the baby voice off and I'll see you guys real soon, all right? It is a mini golden doodle. Joe, mini golden doodle. Okay. All right. All right, guys. See you guys soon. Have a great day.